Viens, divi, viens, divi. Hello. I welcome you here at Riga Business School at Riga Technical University. My name is Ines Muzikant. I'm director of Riga Business School, and today we invited you to the lecture about the future of work in the time of the AI. And I think this is very topical question to discuss, as we see that a lot of you are here, and so we are happy about that. So this is a topic that interests people. And there, with coming AI into our lives, it kind of brings a lot of opportunities, also a lot of risks. Some of the risks we do not realize yet. And I think the most describing word of the situation with AI is uncertainty. We do not know how jobs will look like in the future, what skills do we need as employees, and what we as educational institutions should teach to the students and the future employees. So today we invited here our great friend from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which you know is one of the best, if I don't know, this year the best university in the world. Executive Director of Center of Collective Intelligence and the Director of Workforce Learning in the MIT Open Learning Initiative, Kathleen Kennedy. So welcome, Kathleen. Kathleen will give a little bit of a lecture and presentation about her vision, how the work and jobs will look like in the future. And afterwards, there will be also time for your questions and discussions. So we will make it as a more of a workshop for all of us to be involved. Okay, thank you, Kathleen.
Awesome, thanks, Ines. I'm thrilled to see all of you. So a couple of friendly faces in the audience. I've been actually for the last couple days doing guest lectures at different classes with undergrads, MBA students last night. So it's been really fun getting to know what people are thinking and wondering about here in Riga. I was in town. I spoke at, there was a Future of Work Summit on Monday that maybe some of you attended or you heard about, that was talking about how do we prepare for this future. At MIT, we have been thinking about this and working on this for a really long time. So what I want to share with you is some of the things that we're working on, how we're thinking about the future of work, how that's going to be crafted. And so let's just get into it. So AI and emerging technologies are changing the way that we do everything. And we're seeing new things every day. The way that finance is operating is fundamentally changing. The New York Stock Exchange, for the longest time, was operating in a standard 9:30 to 4 time frame that it's now going to almost 24 hours a day. We're seeing that markets that had been fairly stable for a long time with key players, such as Mercedes, all of the German car companies, that we were seeing that different technology companies were coming into that market and disrupting it. And already some are leaving it. Apple has left the autonomous car market. Tesla, who knows what that's going to be like. Google's still playing in it. And then we're seeing all of these new players come from China. And what's driving that? AI. We now have completely modes of doing things. How many here drove here themselves? How many here took a Bolt? How many here walked? How many here flew? Right. Tomorrow, you would actually have that option potentially. In New York, you could. You could take a flying taxi. We're starting to be able to do things in new ways that we hadn't been able to do before. Why couldn't we fly? Scarcity in a number of different aspects of things. That's changing. And now we're seeing AI can do things better than humans. And our best humans, our humans that had been trained for 15 years, medical school, internship, fellowships, all the things that they needed to do to become a doctor, to be able to detect disease, to understand the science, to be able to detect the patterns, that we're finding that AI is now able to do that better. There's studies that show that AI is able to detect cancer in a human from a radiology image almost a year or two before the human eye is able to see it. So that, if it was me, if it was my child, if it was my parent, I would want the AI to look at that. And then I want the human doctor to help me to figure out what to do, right? So we're thinking about new ways of how we operate, because ultimately, don't we want AI to help us with some of these challenges if it can do it better? Well, that introduces all kinds of challenges. And organizations have been already integrating digital technologies, for years and years and years. Look at all of this. We've got all of these great digital technologies. Some of you might remember, do you remember the transparencies when you would actually have slides and you would have to change each one of them manually, right? So we have all of these new ways of doing things much better. Now, AI is different though, because it's not necessarily just changing, sort of adding a digital technology, but it's adding intelligence. And that's a little bit different. And that's why organizations, they're investing a lot in doing this. But a lot of them are finding that some of the early pilots that they're doing are failing. Are you laughing because your company did one that didn't work? How many here have participated in some form of pilot that didn't seem to work too well? Yeah, okay. So you're sort of feeling this challenge. We're in the early days of this. And so I would say that think about anything that you are learning to do. Did you knock it out of the park the first time? Did you do it perfectly the first time? Did you learn English in 5 minutes? I haven't learned Latvian yet. So I think that these are things like something like this is going to take a long time. The reason why, or one of the reasons why this is so hard, is that organizations are optimized for the world that we've been in. They were optimized for the constraints, right? That's what organizations do. They're highly efficient in that they bring together people, they bring together resources, they bring together equipment, and they're optimized around all the different constraints in the environment that they operate with the resources that they operate with. But this is just one example of we're having AI come in to this world, and it's changing things really fast, right? So in November 2022, ChatGPT was released into the world, and it became the fastest adopted technology on the web within 2 months. Why was that? Who uses ChatGPT today? See, so you're part of this group. Why? Why do you use it? Call out what do you do with it? It saves time. It's better than Google. You were saying something back there. You think it was a novelty, but do you still use it? Yeah. It actually solves a problem. It solves lots of different problems for you. It helps you with your email. It helps you to do lots of different things. It helps you to think. It helps you to fill in the blank, all kinds of different things. It's also going to change jobs. And I think that that is causing a lot of fear. Who's worried about that? Maybe you're not worried about it for yourself. Maybe you're worried about what should your children do? What should they major in college? How should you help them with their homework? What should they be doing? We used to say, teach them to code, teach them to code. Now it's like, was that the right answer? Because we're seeing that that is the area where we're starting to see a lot of disruption, right? So what does that mean? The answer is that AI is fundamentally changing the architecture of work. And what I'm going to talk about in this first part of this talk is, what does that mean? And how should you start thinking about this in new ways? And what should you do? So, that's sort of a setup of the why. Let me take a moment and just tell you who I am and why you should listen to me. So, I've been at MIT for 25 years. I have run large organizations at the Institute. I ran our global media company called Technology Review. I was the chief strategy officer there for 9 years, trying to figure out how to transform what had been a 100-year-old publishing company. And in the world, if anyone knows anything about publishing, that whole business model was collapsing. And I needed to figure out, how do we transform in an age of the internet and digital? Still working on that one. But I passed the reins to someone else to launch our venture fund called The Engine. And that, the premise was, at MIT, we've got a lot of really smart technologists, really smart kids that were coming out and starting new types of companies, bringing the technology and the ideas that they were developing in school and trying to tackle big, hard challenges, often in tough tech. You know what I mean by tough tech? When I talk about tough tech, like really thinking about hardcore technologies, not just creating another digital dating app or something, but actually tough tech like building batteries, building grid scale power, build new types of pharmaceutical companies, solving big challenges, harnessing technology. They were failing, and we were trying to figure out why. There was a number of different reasons. One of them was patient capital, that we needed longer time for things to develop. They needed different types of tools. They needed different types of intelligence. We needed to help them with a number of different things. So that was a whole thing that I did. And then after that, I wanted to focus on this idea around work. So this was about 2017, way before ChatGPT in 2022. But I already saw it coming, that work was fundamentally shifting. And when AI actually got mature enough, it was going to change everything. So I started working at the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence. And there, researchers have been doing research on this question of, how do we create intelligent organizations? How do we bring in, the easy part, digital technologies? We've sort of done that. But actually, how do we think about the completely new architecture of an organization when you bring in intelligence? And then the important part, I think, of the equation is, we can't just introduce these technologies, be like from MIT, wow, we invented AI, isn't it great? Here you go, bye. But how do we help people to learn in new ways? How do we train people for this new world? And so that is MIT Open Learning. And I'm going to talk to you about both of these places because I think together that is part of the answer that you're looking for of what do I do? So first, let's talk about the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence. The areas that we're focusing on right now, in going back to that question that we were thinking about of how do we understand work fundamentally, and then how do we redesign it? So one of the things that we're doing, we're calling the ontology of work. And that's looking at how do we systematically break down work to be able to then re-architect it. So that's sort of the first part of this. Now, what are the pieces to that? So looking at the patterns of work, what do you think about when you think about your job? You think about probably your to-do list that's constantly growing, I would imagine. You think about the people that you're managing and all the tasks and things that they need to accomplish. Well, there's something in America called ONET, which is actually our database in America of all of the jobs in America. Every single one of them broken down to the task level. Singapore has something similar that we're doing research with them. Europe has one. And then there's a company called Lightcast that actually does this commercially, right? So there's all this data around the jobs. What we're doing is bringing that all together and creating the structures around it. So maybe a good analogy to think about it is if you think about, let's think about Darwin. Y'all know Darwin, right? Remember Darwin? Sort of thinking about like the species. And you sort of break down all the different types of birds, all the different types of plants. We're doing that for work, breaking down the whole thing. And then that will allow us to figure out how to build it all back together. And so we are building out all of these different parts, and it goes down, 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 down to the point that you can't even see it anymore. And next week, we're actually publishing a paper that will go very deep into this. So unfortunately, I can't talk about it too much right now because it hasn't been published yet. But it's going to be really big and really interesting. Conceptually, though, it is the key architecture that will be needed to be able to build what we need to do next. This is part of a much larger initiative that we're doing. That's a 5-year program that we're doing in conjunction with a whole other group in Singapore. And we're rethinking every aspect of work and how AI is impacting it. And importantly, I think that this is something that people always ask me about. In Singapore, we're also looking at what is the impact on the economy, on education, and on society, right? You're nodding because that's the big question. Just doing things because we can do them, because AI can do it, isn't really a great answer. We need to actually be truly thinking about what is the impact of this and how can we do it right. So this is just some of the people that I'm working with on this particular piece of work around the ontology of work. So I told you that I've been teaching classes or guest lecturing. And one of the things that I had so much fun a couple days ago, talking to some undergrads here at RBS, and this isn't a thing that we started just talking about a lot. Now, this might look really simple to you. What? Why? Who? How? It might reminds me of my English class. I don't know what the equivalent is for you, but thinking about like right structures around how you think about sentences and how you think about a narrative and a story, right? This actually is a framework to help to think about work, right? Because thinking about what is your goal, who are the people involved in accomplishing that goal, how are you structuring the process, and what are the incentives for the people that are involved in the system? So I'm going to keep going on this, but I want you to remember this. It seems deceivingly simple, but when we're talking about bringing AI into the equation, this very simple framework changes. And it's one of the things that's very important to think about. So, remember my two things. One, we need to understand the architecture of work, and that's the ontology of work. The second bit is then how do we redesign it? So that's a methodology that we've built called Supermind Design. Okay, now it's time for the quiz. How do you define intelligence? And I see a couple familiar faces in the room, so don't call out the answer because you already know it. How do you define intelligence? How do you define intelligence?
Various kind, emotional, intellectual, it's like ability to think.
The ability to think, that's good.
Ability to think, analyze, and like structure and something.
Yeah. Okay, good. Anyone else have a thought? Having common sense, very important one. Critical thinking, very critical and important, and we're going to come to that. A very simple definition of intelligence that I want you to be grounded in as I'm talking about the next things is that it's the ability to achieve a goal, right? So how do we achieve a goal? Now, a key aspect of that, I've been talking about AI, planning the task and then achieving the goal. But AI, if we think about intelligence, each of you have your own individual intelligence. Forget your phone, forget your computer. It's like you, in your brain, you have your own intelligence, your ability to achieve your goals, right? And you go to school to be able to actually do that more effectively. What's AI? Yes, because AI actually has memorized everything. Our intelligence, we do critical thinking, but we don't necessarily remember everything, right? AI seemingly is able to remember everything in a way. So that's why AI and humans together, it's different than just you and Google, right? Or you and Wikipedia, where you can look up all that information, but it's actually able to do something more. So superminds there are collectively intelligent systems, humans and AI, or humans and technology. And what we're doing is looking at ways that we can structure that. You want to take a picture of that? I'll go. Okay, so what we've created is Supermind Design, which is a suite of tools and a framework on how to design humans working with AI. Now, who here has used design thinking? Used design thinking at work, in school, different things. Okay, so a group of you. So design thinking often is used to design a new thing and often used to design new products. Supermind Design is designed to design and architect organizations, and specifically organizations with AI. Okay, so this is the fun part. What are the design moves? How do you do this? Again, deceivingly simple and on purpose, really, because what I want to do is give you things in your mind to be able to sort of think about things in new ways, to open your mind, to change your perspectives. So, the foundational moves are quite simple. My favorite is analogize. One of my first jobs was in the film industry. I worked for the movies. Super fun job, by the way. But that's all about storytelling, right? Why do we love movies? Why? Because it tells a story. It touches you. And analogies are great ways to learn new things or understand things, right? When you can, often when you're in school trying to learn new topics, if a friend of yours or your parents will explain something to you and then tell you the example of why it matters or how it works, sometimes it clicks in your brain, you sort of get it, right? Stories are a key thing of how humans relate to things, understand things. And so we see that when we're trying to crack something, develop something new, thinking about, oh my gosh, let's see. So often, remember I told you I did a bunch of things in venture. I'm often a judge for startup competitions. And think about a startup pitch. It's like Uber, but it does this, right? Everyone's always comparing it to something that people know, right? So that's why analogies are really important. Another one, zooming in or out. Often, when you're too close to something, you get stuck on it. You can't figure out how to solve this particular thing. And sometimes by zooming out and looking at the problem from a high level, it will help you to figure it out. Or, on the other hand, sometimes you get too high up, especially like if you're the boss and there's challenges within your organization. You're like, why can't we fix this? Sometimes you have to go right into it to sort of sort out the different parts of it to figure it out. So those are pretty standard design thinking moves. The ones that are the Supermind design moves, I'm going to go into each one. So, remember when we talked about intelligence, right? The ability to achieve a goal. Let's think about how do you achieve goals? You make a series of decisions, often as a group. And the question is, how are those decisions made? Often at work, our organizations are hierarchies. There's the CEO, VPs, managers, frontline workers, right? Decisions are made at the top and cascade down from there. That's how things get done, right? That's how decisions are made. That's how things operate. Democracies, everyone's got to vote, right? In a market, supply and demand. And we see how all of these things sort of operate digitally, right? eBay, excellent example of a digital marketplace, right? And then there's so many other marketplaces. So you can think about how this happens with humans, but let's think about how once we introduce AI and another form of intelligence into the system, how that operates differently. The next one's Cognify. Now, this is actually how we make decisions and what happens. So if we break down and think about this, how does it happen? What's the first step? You've got to make a decision. So you create a list of options. So that's what this bit is here. You create a list of options, and then you sense what's around you, right? So what's happening? Y'all are really quiet. I hear that Latvians are sort of quiet. So you sense what's around you, and then you remember what happened before. And then you make a decision, choosing one, and you act. And then whatever happens, that whole thing goes back, you learn, and it goes back into your remember file. Some of those you store. Some of them you store sort of in the front. Some become hardened into instincts, right? And so that's sort of this intelligent behavior that as we start to think about how to bring in artificial intelligence to pair it with our human intelligence, we need to actually cognitively think about these things and think about how the whole process works. In the military, they have a similar thing called the OODA loop. Has anyone heard of that? Okay. It's sort of a similar thing to that. Now, this one I think is a really important thing because it unlocks some aspects of why is AI different than other digital technologies that we've experienced before. So, usually, we think about technology as a tool, right? You all have them right now. Everyone's got their phone in their pocket or in their hand. And that's a tool that is going to do things for you, right? You tell it what to do. Sometimes it feels like magic, but it's actually a digital technology that is helping you to accomplish something, but that you have to activate it. You have to make it do something. An assistant supports you. So let's see. A calculator is a great example of a tool, right? Punch in your numbers and it helps you to do the math. But you do it. An assistant, there's digital assistants that are going to support you in an activity. Now, there's some AI that actually acts as a great support mechanism. It's actually an intelligence that will support you. You don't have to do everything. It actually supports the activity and adds intelligence to your intelligence. Now, where the big change is in these two. This is where we're getting into that architecture of work and how it's changing. That we're finding that AI can be a collaborator with us and to think with us. But in the structure of work, we're actually seeing that AI is a peer to a human in some environments, right? So remember thinking about that hierarchy structure, for instance, and you can think about those org charts that some of you in the audience may have had to make org charts and change org charts. You always have people in the boxes. Well, now, some companies actually have AI in the boxes too, right? That they're peers to people. It's interesting. What does that mean? And then some organizations are starting to have AI operate as managers because in some structures, an AI can actually direct and make decisions around the work. What needs to happen? So, for instance, let's use a call center. Let's do the analogy of a call center to think about that. All of you, I'm sure, have had to call customer service to try to solve a problem. Usually, you call, there's a human that answers the phone. They hopefully know a lot of things more than you. That's why you're calling them. And you want to solve the problem. So, for a long time, you have the tool that's the phone, and they have some support systems in place that's helping them. But usually it's you and the human. Now the system is changing where you have a call comes in, and there's actually an AI manager at the top that decides, based on the data about you, if it's going to go to a human that's peered with an AI. So that human is peers with the AI. The AI is the manager. The human has a bunch of AI assistants that's helping them with the information that they need based on the question that you're asking. And everyone's still using the phone. That's the tool that's enabling what's happening. So it's a change in the operating model. But what that is fairly simply doing what we've always done with the same structure that we've always done it, just adding AI and technology into the structure. How many of you think that this new structure is working better? So, but do we think that just adding the AI into the usually way that we did call centers? Exactly. So a lot of the early days of the implementation of these types of things is that we haven't changed the organizational structure of the organization. We're just adding new technology in to be more efficient in theory. But is it actually solving the problems of the customers in a better way? Right. Everyone's a little skeptical about this. Not necessarily. So, how do we need to change the way that we work? I think this is the fundamental question that we're all having of how do we do this? So, back in 2021, when we built, we built the Supermind design framework. Tom Malone is the head of the Center for Collective Intelligence, and he started working on this in the 90s. He started working on then what was called the Process Handbook. Not nearly as fun sounding as Supermind's design, right? The Process Handbook. And it was basically doing the ontology, cataloging all of the processes. Then we started applying it in new ways throughout the 2010s. And then in 2020, OpenAI launched GPT-3, right? And so we were like, wow, we were the first group at MIT that got access to this thing, right? That was this autoaggressive language model. I remember I had these students, grad students, that were so excited about it. Remember, I said, GPT what? But quickly, we started using it, and we started looking at how it could supercharge the framework that we'd been working on. And we were like, wow, this is different. This is really interesting. So that was, this was a slide that we made back in early 2021. And then, let's see, we know, remember our slide, our graph before, November 2022, OpenAI put a chat interface on top of GPT-3. And it felt like it changed the world. Because in a way, it sort of did. Let's see. I'm not sure how important this is right now. The bottom line on this is that we built something called the Ideator. Ideator.mit.edu. This is an interesting tool that if you're thinking about how to transform your organization, or you want a thought partner on how do I do this in a new way? How do I think about adding AI to what I do and do something differently? This will help you to how do I define my challenge statement? Like, right, how do I think about it and how do I frame it? Because I know a lot of you probably already do that when you're using ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever you use, that a lot of it is about how do you ask the question. And that's a lot of when we think about how do we want to help train our children. It's about asking the questions, asking the right questions. Prompt engineering you probably hear all the time, but that's sort of what it is. How do we start to think more critically and actually frame how we ask those questions? So a big part of this is how do we explore the problem space and take the time to do that. And then the second is how do we, right? We want to achieve our goals. How do we do that? And so with Supermind Design, this is just some of the people that I worked with, because what's so important is the people. How did we build this? Who helped us to do this? So now I can talk a little bit about why. What did we do? Why did it make any difference? One of the early bits of research that we did probably back in 2023 was look at how is this going to transform the workforce? Now, 3 years later, 4 years later, we're starting to see this. Remember that graph that I showed where we've seen the impact of AI? We're seeing it in programming. Why is that? Why do you think programming was one of the areas that AI sort of is transforming first? It's logical. So it's rule-based. It's very easy to put AI and another intelligence into it. Systems. Expensive workforce, right? There's never enough coders. We don't have enough coders. We got to pay them more. We can't find good enough ones. So this study was looking at how, at the time, this is before Copilot, how can GPT-3 help a trained programmer? Does it make them more effective, go faster, right? So it made them 27% faster. And how about those untrained humans? No coding experience whatsoever. Could they build a website just as easily as the trained coder? In fact, they could. And then if you extrapolate how much money a completely untrained person versus the trained person. Now, as the human, I remember when I first heard about this study and that we were doing it and then the results, I was like, I don't like those results at all. Right? What does that mean? So it's very important that we think about this holistically, right? So what does this mean for hiring? How many of you have been in the hiring system lately, either as a hirer or a hiree? Sort of a mess, right? So we've got AI has been added to the old system and it's sort of mucking it up at multiple levels, right? You've got so many resumes, all the constraints on creating a resume that is highly tailored for the job. Now everyone can just do that. Then, yeah. Exactly. Because we didn't change the system. We just added AI to the old system we just released all the constraints, but we didn't change the incentive structure in the way. We didn't change all of the bits. So we have the algorithms, we're able to do a lot of different things, but we didn't really change the human system. And in multiple areas, it is really messed up. One long project that we've been doing is with NATO and in rethinking how we can operate in different spheres and do strategy in different ways with emerging technologies. And then we've been rethinking therapeutics. How can you help people in new ways? How can you develop new diagnostics and new drugs in new ways if you really transform the whole system? So for this part, and I'd love to discuss a little bit, but I just want to leave you with this quote because I think that it's a really good one that makes you think about when intelligence is scarce, productivity is going to win. And that is the world that we've been living in and optimizing for a long time. But now in our new AI world, when intelligence is completely abundant, the organizations that are going to win are the ones that are able to harness this intelligence in new ways. So it's not about replacing people with AI. It's about how do you organize in a way that is going to optimize on intelligence. Now, remember the second part of my equation is we've got the very important work that we need to be doing of reorganizing our organizations. We need to start to train people differently, right? Because the world is going to be different. And you probably came here today thinking, wow, maybe this woman from MIT is going to tell me what to do and how to think about it. Well, I hope that the first part inspired you a bit about how to think about this moment that we're in, right? Now let's talk a little bit about how you can do new things to learn. So MIT Open Learning, again, these are the areas that we're seeing disruption. And the architecture of work's changing. So learning's got to be redesigned too. So MIT Open Learning is a group that's been around for a really long time. It launched in 2001. And it launched with something called OpenCourseware. Has anyone here used MIT OpenCourseware? Yep, yep. So what we did then back in 2001, which let's remember, back in 2001, I see some folks here that probably remember like I do, that was the .com, the rise of the .com, right? We had the internet. And that changed everything. It felt transformative, and it was. At that time, MIT opened all of its classes and offered them online for free. Because before 1995, when the internet really started to, I think, become very prevalent, there was no digital learning. You had to go to a place with a book and learn. But now we had this new model of online learning. And then in 2011, we launched something called MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses, right? And so then that was like you're coming into the classroom, and it was very much like, you know, the professor talking not just to the students, but to you on your computer. And we launched something with Harvard called edX that still exists today and now is an open online platform. We launched a MicroMasters program. We launched a residential program that helped with online learning. So a lot of this sounds like now, when you think about it, like duh, of course, everyone has all of that. But at the time, it was new and innovative. In 2019, we launched something that I went on to start leading in 2020 that's called MIT Horizon. And at the time, that was actually a fairly novel thing that was thinking about how do we not just basically take the films of those professors, and doing exactly what they do in person, but how do we fundamentally transform how we learn with digital? Now, and that's been going on. Has anyone used something called Duolingo to learn new languages? Yep. There's all kinds of different platforms like that. There's probably a number of them that you have locally here that are new ways of learning, gamifying something, doing things in different ways, right? So we started doing different things like that. And then in 2025, we've launched sort of the next thing of how do we bring AI into learning at every level? And how do we have AI tutors? How do we have all of these different aspects of AI intelligence helping a student learn? And the new platform that we've done now is called Universal Learning, and that's thinking about building all of these things together. So, why does that all matter? Now, the question is this the cause or the effect? And I'm not sure, it's probably a bit of both. Think about probably your grandparents. The model of life was sort of chapters. You were in school, you finished school and you went to work, you retired. Very, very sort of clear modes. Well, the employment pathway has changed. And so, now you probably, with your job, you had to take like different courses to get a certificate to sort of advance in your career or different things. So you're doing different things, or you went back to get an MBA, or you went back to you left work and went and got something else. What we're finding today is not only are people continuously learning, they're also continuously changing jobs, right? So you're no longer going and working for the same company for 30 years and then retiring into a blissful life, but you're actually reinventing yourself, doing a lot of different things. Maybe you're working for a large company. Maybe you're working for the government. Maybe you're going to do a startup, start over, do all the different things. So lots of different modes. So people are changing the way that they operate. So that new modality, that new reality, coupled with AI, we're rethinking how we need to think about education. And in 2020, we created a model called Agile Continuous Education. How do we need to think about how we all need to be agile? How do we need to be continuously learning? You probably hear this a lot. I feel like this is continuous learning is starting to be something that's discussed a lot around with AI. How do you do this? And so we're thinking about all the different modalities of how do you learn something yourself? All of you, I applaud. You came here today to actually come, not just learn something yourself online, but to come together, that I'm imparting some new knowledge to you. And then afterwards, we'll probably discuss it. You'll discuss it with your friends, we'll discuss it together, that will reinforce things. And I hope that some of the things, the frameworks that I talked about, might inspire you to take a next action, to you apply it to help you to think through a challenge. But sort of thinking about these different modes of how do you learn, how do you apply your knowledge. And then the other aspect of the things that we're doing is I've got a lot of scientists that I work that think about the human brain and how does intelligence work? How do we learn? And how do we build new learning experiences that actually further the learning, help you to learn something? How do you learn something in 10 minutes? Right? Do we really need to spend years? Do we need to spend hours? Do we need to spend days, months? Can we learn something in short chunks and then think about ways that we apply it rapidly and then build on that? So, the other question is, you are different than you, and you are different than you. We're all individuals. We all have different backgrounds. We're all at different levels. We all work in different industries with different skill sets. And we have to do different tasks, right? So we all have to do different things. You probably want a different learning experience than you, and you, and you, and you. So all of us have come, I think, to expect that AI is going to deliver that for us. Because ChatGPT feels like it's talking to you, and it answers your question, versus a lot of times digital things did not feel that it was exactly for you. They were customized sometimes to sort of say, hello, Kathleen, good morning. But you sort of also knew that it was just programmed that way. How do we bring customized learning and adaptive learning to everyone, right? How do we do that? So this is what I was saying. We all have different interests, backgrounds, and goals. And then everyone learns differently. I like to see and hear things. Like I said, I worked for the movies. I love a good story. Teach me with a story. It was shocking to me to learn that not everyone's like that, right? My husband wanted something completely different, loved to read academic papers. My God, it was incredible. Like, I did not. That was not how I learned. So I think that, everyone needs their different aspect of things. Education, for the longest time, has been a bit of a one-size-fits-all, right? Let's go back to remember when I was talking about the MOOCs online. So we brought that classroom to the web. But what we did was we translated what we did in person with the professor at the lectern, and we videoed it, right? So one size fits all. So here we've got...
Let me give you some of the details of multiple linear regression model. We are given data of the dependent variable yi, the price realization of auction I, and independent variables x subscript I superscript 1, the age of the wine, xi2, the average growing season temperature, xi3, the harvest rain, xi4, the winter rain.
You got that? Okay, there'll be a test. So that is what we did. Now, some people loved it, or you could also rewind it and watch it again, which can be very useful. I've watched this several times. Now, the example that he used is a very classic example about the wine industry. I don't know if you caught that, but it's basically how do you teach a linear regression model in a very specific context, right? And then highly technical, and that presentation goes on and on and on. So, what if, I unfortunately don't work in the wine industry, I would love to, but you work in healthcare, right? So how do we actually deliver something that will be relevant, more relevant to someone, and give them more context that will be useful for them? Or how do we change it so that it makes sense for someone in the energy industry? Okay, so the sound is not working on those two, but it was just a complete redo of that, but with a completely relevant context for that. Now, what if you're like me and do not have 30 minutes to watch every single video about linear regression, but in fact, you want to get the basics about it in 30 seconds?
Here's the 30-second summary. We model log wine price as yi equals beta plus beta1 x1 plus e, fitted by minimizing the sum of squared errors, SSE. R squared equals 1, minus SSE SST measures how much better we do than predicting the overall average only. Using age, temperature, and rain as predictors, a simple model reaches R squared to 0.42 on Bordeaux data and
Now, that one is a little tough because it's a highly dense topic. But we have this for multiple topics that are much easier to absorb. And so this is just one example of how do you teach something and you're able to contextualize it in a lot of different ways. How about if we want to do it in Japanese? Because I was just in Japan and did this. Unfortunately, I don't have it in Latvian yet. But that was not one of the 20 languages that we started with. But
今日の話題は組織やポートフォリオの非次元リターンをどうやって予測するかということです。具体的には市場リターン、筋力の変化。
The Japanese loved it because it now is giving them the context that they wanted in their language and basically delivering what you need. Now, the other aspect of this is, okay, I don't know if you, like me, that linear regression, even though it was 30 seconds, I still didn't totally get it, right? So I answered the knowledge check question wrong. We're going to go back and give me a different angle on it to help me to actually learn and understand that. So what I'm trying to do here is give you an example of how education can become adaptive and personalized for everyone in ways that we were never able to do it before because of the limitations that we had in the old way that we worked. So what we're doing at MIT is building personalized learning for everyone in the world that's going to be powered by AI and built by MIT. And that's what we're doing. And you can check it out at learn.mit.edu. And then if you're interested in that paper that I mentioned that's coming out, it should come out next week, I'd be happy to send that to you because I think that the transformation of work is a really important one. So I've got a bunch more slides, but I was going to pause there because I thought it would be interesting to just have a discussion. I'm sure lots of you have questions. I'd be happy to sort of double click on any of the things, or if you've got a question on sort of a related but slightly different topic, I'd be happy to open a discussion around that as well. So I don't know if we have another mic for the audience or if we're small enough that we can just do that.
We have a mic.
Perfect.
So, if you have any questions or something to add, just raise your hand. I will pass you the mic.
Hello, Arvids Jägers. Question regarding job displacement. I mean, actually, I have two questions, but let's start with the first one. Robotics and AI are exponentially evolving, and we already see robot taxis and so on. People that are displaced by these activities, are they the ones that can actually educate themselves in this manner? And if not, what would happen with them? That's the first one. The second one, knowledge or amount of knowledge that can be learned also increases exponentially. How do people decide or know what to learn? Because you cannot sit every single hour of your day and learn something new.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's take the first one. This is work that we're doing in a couple different places. One, the work that we're doing in Singapore on looking at how do we need to transform governance in new ways to help people to understand what to do. The second is in America, we've started a program called PATH that is it's funded by google.org, and then we're sort of doing work state by state because different regions in America are being impacted in different ways. Just like you just said, the Baltics are being impacted in a different way than perhaps in America, right? So we realize that there's regional work that needs to be done region by region. We're doing it in two aspects of it. Path, we're looking at it from the perspective of how do we help people, and we're focusing on that. We are working at the 4-year university point, the 2-year university, and I don't know if you have 2-year universities or what we often call trade schools, right? So you're often taught a different trade. So, and then we're working with the government and local industry to understand the industry in a specific state or city and help them to figure out the new system of exactly what are those new jobs going to be, because we're looking at the different parts of that system and helping to reshape that, because everyone needs to be at the table to solve the challenge, right? It's not just something that is going to be solved. I think that it's great that Google.org is actually funding that work, right? And I think that they're funding work here. I know that they supported, I was at the Day of AI on Tuesday. That is something that's underwritten by Google.org that was at, I think there were thousands of high school students that were getting access to this new kind of education. Now, the answer on the what to learn exactly and what are the jobs, that's why we started the PATH program. And in America, there's a number of other programs that they're looking at doing this regional intervention and helping the companies, because, you know, the companies are trying to figure it out too. Like, right? Like yesterday, I was on a call with a very large retailer, global retailer, but based in the US, their CTO and their chief HR person. Now, what's interesting with that, I've been doing this work for a really long time. You don't usually get the CTO and the head of HR on a call together. That's the second time in the last 3 months that I've done a call like that. So you're seeing companies are understanding this challenge in a new way. And so they're rethinking the work. And that's why I think this work that we're doing is so important, that you need to figure out, how do we change the organization? And that's what we're helping them with. They're asking the CTOs, like, how are we changing the organization? We've already bought Copilot for everyone. We've already bought Gemini. We're introducing all of these different tools. But now I'm talking to the head of HR because we've got to figure out, we've already done all the training for all those things, but now what? And so companies, like, we need to start pairing different groups of people together to sort of figure that out. And then, right, so it's an entire system. There's not one answer, but I think that I think the EU is really sort of thinking about this. I've heard about some different programs that are happening. I think this is part of the LIFT program that I know Xanda back there is really been working with a lot of companies here on how do we do that. We've been talking to RBS on how do we bring in some of these new micro-learning things so that you don't have to drive here and come here to do this every single time, right? And how do you do that? So that's the basics on the answer on that. Someone want to introduce a new topic?
Thank you for your lecture. And you already mentioned that you attended Future of Jobs conference, and I was listening partially to it, and it very frequently speakers were saying, you need to learn AI. Okay.
What
so
does that mean?
What does that really mean?
Oh, yes. So we talk about this all the time, because what does that mean? It means something to everyone in a different way, actually, I think. Sometimes, so that's why I like to do the definition on what does intelligence mean. Because there's so much hype around AI, and then exactly, you go to a conference or you go to something and they just said, well, you just need to learn AI. Like, does that mean I need to learn how to do prompting of ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude? Does that mean that I need to, and like, this girl's pretty good at it, right? And I bet a lot of you are pretty good at it. But is that what it means? A little bit. That's generative AI, and you've basically learned how to use a tool. It's different from that. Fundamentally, what it means is that you actually need to understand data and be able to manipulate data in new ways. An analogy that I've been playing with, because I was at that conference and talking, and I go to a lot of different conferences like this, that talking to people, and they ask me the question, yeah, what does it mean? What does learning AI mean? An analogy that I think is interesting is that people used to go to school and take classes for typing. Like, there were classes for it. And then there were careers for it. And it was a very specific thing that you took. But now, no one really takes classes on typing. You just know, like, you're typing right now. Like, it's almost ubiquitous. Like that you don't even think about learning it anymore. Whatever device that you're on, you type, and that's what you do. I think AI is sort of getting similar to that, or going to be similar to that. That right now, it seems like, remember that video of learning linear regression, and it feels very difficult? To us, it's probably sort of hard because it's not native to us. So we're having to learn a completely new language. So you need to learn sort of the different fundamentals of what the different pieces mean. And then you need to understand how is this intelligence working? And then how do I use it in my work? So I would say that you need to understand how to understand the basics on generative AI, and what does that unlock for you? Do you want to learn how to do vibe coding so that you could actually type yourself instead of having to ask a developer to do something, that if you actually just want to build your own agent, you could? Do you want to probably rethink how your organization is going to work? You probably want to be able to make decisions on different vendors and understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you. We've got a number of different tools for that. And then you probably want to understand what does this mean for governance? How do I need to rethink how decisions are made at the board level and at the executive level? So there's a number of different programs that are really good for explaining that. Those are the things that I would say that you would probably want to start with, depending on what aspect, where the application area was for you. Does that make sense? Super. Of course.
I'm quite positive about AI, but what I see, sometimes people are just either they are not making the correct prompt or something like that. They're just reading as headings in the newspaper. For example, they receive some wrong answers from ChatGPT, then they start using. And this is a question about how do they learn, because I suppose the most part of the people in the beginning, they will be like not writing correctly the prompt or something like that. And so the question is, what about the collective IQ level of the society? And will not it bring that in some period of time it will bring down, because you cannot, how to say, separate.
Because the knowledge, so there's a couple different parts to that.
Yeah.
So one, we need to continue to have education for people so that they don't get stupid, and that we actually need to even supercharge the way that we do critical thinking so that they actually are able to decipher between what is true and what's not true, and how to make what is one of the most important things for humans: judgment. And so what actually is probably the biggest structural problem that we have in this moment that we're in the transformation, and you're hinting at that right now, is right now companies are operating with the old operating model of efficiency. And so what they're doing is, ooh, it's more efficient to bring in agents and do different things, so I don't need my entry-level workers anymore. Now, what's going to happen is if we take out all of those entry-level jobs, that is going to be a problem, because that's where you start to build the knowledge so that you have the judgment so that you are better at your job. And that fundamentally is the big challenge that we've got, that we need to reassess on how we're doing that. So I think that it is so important for educational systems like this school, that where we are right now, like the school that I was at on Tuesday, that they're looking at how do we rethink how to do education. One of the big debates in every single class that I was in with the students was, they're telling us that we can't use ChatGPT in the classroom. They're like, yeah, we know that you are. And so what we need to be rethinking is, how do we actually teach them how to use it responsibly, how to decipher what is important and what is not. And that's a big shift that we need to have in education. And that's something, so in going back to your question of what do I need to learn, it's sort of thinking about how do I need to transform the way learning's done utilizing these types of tools. How do I think about my system in education or my training system at work, that I need to think about it in a continuous way and reformulate the way that I do it. Now, I know that that's challenging for a number of different reasons. There's still a lot of constraints. There's still laws that you sort of have to follow. There's still lots of things. So we need to all work together to sort of work through, how do we solve this? Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I actually wanted to continue on the fact that it's a big challenge for us as a school, because if, let's say, especially in the undergraduate level, the guys that come out and graduate the school, they basically have the knowledge in most cases how to do the specific job or task or whatever.
Yep.
The only thing that they lack actually is experience. And the experience is the thing that is, in a sense, killing them in a workplace. Because let's say if you go to auditing firm, and most of big auditing firms never laying off. What they are laying off, they are laying off juniors, because they are replaced by AI. Programmers, they are laid off. Who are laid off? Juniors, the ones who they basically have the knowledge. What they miss is the experience, intuition, feeling, which is basically what the AI is. AI is like, it's in a sense like this LLM works like
it actually is sort of like an intern in a way.
It's a data-driven. It's basically working on a data collected and making judgments or trying to predict on the data collected. So this is in a sense like the experience part that you're adding, and this actually is a big challenge. Yes, for us as a school, how we provide it so that they remain competitive, because now I don't know how to motivate young people to learn not only business but also like programming. If they go in the marketplace and they see they don't have jobs, so it's actually also the companies, they need to understand that in a sense, if they will not hire those unexperienced youngsters, they will run out of their resource within like a few years. So basically, they will not renew their workforce.
Yep. So I think there's a couple points on that one. So number one, the PATH program that I talked about, we're working with organizations to basically help the students get the experience while they're in school. Like, how do we rethink the model so that you don't have to remember my graph of like that it's chapters? We need to stop thinking about the chapters and think about how do you bring that experience closer to that you're actually getting the experience while you're in school. Or different, I mean, I think that the apprentice model has been around for a very long time. We need to bring the apprentice model back. Now, the flip side of that is that you find that you're needing people to have experience in AI that a lot of people in the workforce do not have. But these junior level people are getting it in schools, they're getting it very fast because they're digital natives. So as we transform work really rapidly, there'll be ways that they can get plugged in new ways. So do I think that we're in a cycle? We're not in a great cycle right now, but we've had lots of these cycles before. If you think about 2008, if you think about 2001, if you think about like different cycles, they were for different reasons. But there'll be lots of new and different jobs emerging and different models that we need to work through. How do we do that? And that's what I'm saying. We're working on a number of different models to do that.
Sorry, I came to the front because from the back probably I wouldn't get
Oh,
my
thank
mic.
you.
Actually, I was preparing the question when I was coming to this lecture specifically for you. And we've been talking a lot of education.
Yeah.
But I'm coming back to when I was in US in AI class and I asked professor, so what do you think, what is the future of AI in business? And how we can measure this success? Because I'm just accountant and I love everything to measure in dollars. And his answer was very clear that once there will be a company which will generate just with AI $1 billion in revenues, that will be a success. Then we believe then, okay, AI now generated for us business $1 billion per annum. And that's a benchmark he put. My question to you, since we are talking now about education and how to educate people, what AI can do, what do you think would be a threshold, let's say, or unit when you say, okay, now AI can educate properly students, people, that we can measure the success? Because in business it's $1 billion, but now let's think about from education perspective. Where do you believe, even from MIT perspective, you made this great thing, but then we will say it's not just as a hype, as you told, but this is really something, achievement. And how would you measure this?
How would I measure achievement? I guess the question is, let's see. You measure things, the incentive, in multiple ways. So incentives, I think if we break it down, there's probably three main buckets. One, you just mentioned money, right? Money, very crisp, clear way of measuring. What do they say? Money doesn't buy everything. So what's the second? Glory. People are motivated by getting recognition. They're motivated by people paying attention to them. They're motivated by their ego. So thinking about glory, companies are often motivated by getting recognition for different things. And then love. Love motivates people. You love your family, you love your coworkers, sort of like or you love the topic of it, or you love getting knowledge. Like that is sort of the three areas that motivate people, but also motivate systems of people. And so if we think about that, I think a lot of the focus on the incentive structure of business is money. Right. What is the incentive structure of government? Is taking care of the people. It should be for sort of like everyone to be taken care of. How do we think about what is the governance model? Like, I think that's probably part of the challenge that we have, that business is farther along than our governance structure. And we need to transform our governance structure, and you can see this in different regions. Different regions are doing this differently. You see in Europe that there's a lot more governance and care for the people. I think that we're thinking we're going to choose people over profits in a way, and that's making us want to govern AI more. Now, a lot of the companies are saying, oh, but that means we're going to lose. Early. I think Singapore is trying to think about how to do both at the same time, how to really make sure to study and think about this and think about the systems. I think that you already have employment laws that protect people quite strictly for a reason. It's good. There's going to be carnage in America because we don't. We lay off everyone. It's going to be a mess. I think ultimately you're going to win in the end. Why do they say that, though? So, all right. So, that's the grass is always greener. And so, let's go with this. I come from Boston. I come from MIT. You probably think that seems pretty impressive. It is. It absolutely is. But we people in Boston, we're winter people, we're quiet people, and we always think that Silicon Valley's better. Always. I hear in Latvia, you think that Estonia is often better or ahead of you. They're also winter people, so it sort of breaks my analogy a little bit. But what they're better at is marketing. Silicon Valley, way better at marketing. We're better at tough tech stuff. Can't break, right? If it breaks, people die. Like, we're good at the really, really hard stuff. They're better at apps. Doesn't matter if it breaks, and frankly, it feels like it doesn't work half the time. So I think that there's different sort of cultures that we're always thinking about, like we need to do better, we need to fix this, we need to do better, versus sort of thinking, we'll figure it out after. And sort of they're two different models. And I think that you're thinking about, this is really hard. How do we solve this? And how do we think about all of the things, right? And so that's an important way of thinking. But there's another way of thinking too that a lot of people are taking the approach. And that's what I'm saying, is that everyone thinks America's better. Not necessarily. So I think we're all trying to figure this out together.
I saw a hand there, so I'll pass the mic.
Hi. I wanted to ask you a personal question. What's your learning hack or strategy? Because you come from educational learning industry with AI. Every AI news yesterday is already outdated today. So what you are studying and how you do it to be most effective, because as well you have job, you travel, you will present. I think it's busy lifestyle. Yeah, and how you do that, and if you have a hack for that already.
Oh, absolutely. So I would say that I have trained some different models for different things that I do that help me. Because I travel a lot, I'm often on a different time zone than my staff, my friends, my different things. So I actually often will utilize a large language model tool to help me think through a challenge. And I've got a number of different sort of, in Claude, they're called problems. In ChatGPT, it's sort of like a different topic area that I'll use to work through sort of a challenge area for myself. And so I use it often as an intelligence tool to help push my thinking on different areas. On different learning things, I obviously use all of the things that we have for free at MIT, and that other things that I have access to. But then I also talk to people. I love doing things like this. I love going to conferences, and sure, I do the on stage bit, but like, I'll stay here today and talk to you because I'm learning from you based on the questions that you ask. And so always talking to people, and not just people like me. I want to talk to all kinds of different people, because going back to your point about how do we not let people get stupider. We need to make sure that they're exposed to a lot of different voices and a lot of different things. People need to talk to people, but also I think talking to AI can help push your thinking. So those are some of the hacks I have. Like on my team, we're always sharing different hacks. So we've got a Slack channel that we use for all kinds of different things that people are using, different papers that they're reading, different tools that they're using, different AI things that they love. So, yep.
Hello, my name is Martin. Thanks for this story. I would like to build up a bit more on this structural challenge about people who will join the club and who will not, and that we have those junior job problems, etc., and we need to reshape education. But in reality, we recognize that in next 10 years, in next decade, all the society who wants to still be in the process need to learn a lot more and then create new habits. Otherwise, they will definitely be behind. How you feel right now? Is there some kind of already forecast knowledge or something like that about the structural challenge of the society as such? You look it in this challenge globally. So whether society is ready to change so fast, is there a limit?
I think that societies have had a lot of these types of challenges before. This is not the first time that we're doing it. Let me go back to my analogies because I love them. One is that when cars first came out, they were highly regulated, and you had to have a horse head on the front of it so that you wouldn't scare the other horses. You had to have 3 people operate it, right? You had the driver, you had a mechanic, and I think the other person was a backup driver, right? So we had all of these things that we did because like society wasn't ready for it, and that's what we sort of overregulated and thought. But then we sort of pushed through. There were a lot of entrepreneurs that did different things, and in fact, society was a little bit more ready for it than we thought, pretty fast. And I think that looking at that sort of example, I think that there's a lot of, like, we are worried right now. We are so worried right now because we sort of apply what we're seeing to what we've experienced in the past. And what we need to be focused on is a lot of the things that I talked about. We need to rebuild, we need to build new systems because we don't have the same constraints that we had. We need to actually rethink what we do with the new paradigm that we're in. And I think we can get rid of the horse head. We don't need 2 people. Like, you're not going to go get in your car and there's 2 people waiting for you to drive. That's not going to happen. We need to be doing the hard work of figuring this out. And it's not just one magic solution. It's the systemic change, but we know we can do it, right? It's all the pieces that we need to do. And that's why I see the work that I do is so important, and how do we push it out into the world? Because we need to be having framework changes, system changes, education changes, all of it at once. Do I think that we're ready as a world? Like you, I'm an optimist. I believe that we can. Now, do we have a lot of problems in our world right now? I don't know that the war's because of AI. We already had all these problems. Or which war even, right? There's several. So I think that we already had all of these problems. I am going to take the optimistic point of view that all the things that we had before weren't solving that. I think that we harness AI to help us to solve it. And I actually do believe in our kids. because I think they think differently. They're digital natives. They don't have the same fears that we do. So that's my point of view on it.
We still have time for one more question. Anyone?
Hi.
Hi.
I also have some personal question. What was the last thing that you have asked to AI?
Oh, well, let's see. That's a great question. I will tell you. We're getting suggestions. What was that? Yep, I was writing an email and I was asking for word suggestions on how to phrase something. So that was the last question that I asked, right? So if you remember, I used to be an editor. No, I wasn't an editor, sorry. I worked with editors. And so I used to have copy editors like on my staff. Now I have AI that helps me to do that. Awesome.
Okay, Kathleen, any final remarks?
I want to thank you for your questions. I want to thank you for your thoughtfulness. I want to thank you for being here. I hope that some of these things inspired you and helped to connect some dots in your head, and maybe some of it you'll look into further or helps you in what you do next. And I wish you like all the best in the world.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you very much. A little present from Riga Business School. And to all of you, I invite you to, first of all, we have some courses on AI left spaces. You can sign up for those. And we invite you to the coffee, some refreshments, and try to talk to somebody in this room you don't know and discuss something about AI, fears maybe, and worries. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Kathleen. Thank you.
Which side would you like to go out of hotel? To the right or to the left? I put two restaurants and AC Marriott is in the middle, so.
Honestly, you pick. I am good with anything.
Thank you, Kathleen. Uzreiz tie galdi traucē tik cilvēki. Nezinu.
Nu jā, nu es nevis atklāšu, bet bija tikai pirmoreiz šajā varam uziet, jā.
Давай. Drīkst nošērot LinkedIn.
Jā,
es
drīkst.
Tur daudz 6000 sekotāji. Tāpēc, kad uzstājās šī dāma, var ielikt tādu bildi LinkedIn. Kā droši ar RBS. Saskaņots ir.
var ar pusbeigas pasākums atvērts.
Tagad ir tavs īstais laiks ar visiem, man liekas. Es atnākšu uz nākamo, vienkārši tā varētu sarunāt.
Kad tas būs nākamais, tu zini? Tur tajā pusē, tur ir pie BT1 var likt arī. Tur ir viņam laba cena, kamēr